Hi everyone and welcome back to Brickcats. The subject of today's review is Jerac's TIE Bomber model. As always, I greatly appreciate it if you subscribe or give the video a like, leave a comment, or support the channel in any other way you see fit. Your support means more great mock reviews in the future. The TIE Bomber didn't get much screen time in the original trilogy, mostly limited to bombing the big asteroid in The Empire Strikes Back. And I actually never noticed this until doing my research for this review. But there is a TIE bomber hanging from perhaps a launching rack in one of the opening scenes from Return of the Jedi as well. It had a bit more of an appearance in Star Wars Rebels, but outside of Empire, most of my memories of the TIE bomber came from the X-Wing and TIE Fighter computer game from the mid to late 90s. In my reviews, I offer my opinions on aesthetics, parts issues you might want to look out for, the build experience, the model's integrity, and I offer a conclusion. If you're watching this, I assume you have bought the instructions or are interested in buying them, and I assume a basic level of familiarity with Bricklink's ordering system. Lastly, my disclaimer on this and all my mock reviews is that I only use genuine LEGO bricks, and I always purchase the instructions myself for my own personal enjoyment, in the hopes that my advice will make your experience more enjoyable and/or less expensive. The TIE Bomber is not the eyeball shape of the TIE Fighter, and Jerac captures the two cylindrical pods with his trademark accuracy. Since we don't see the bomber much in canon, the specific definition of the curves is a bit hard to lock down, but Jerac's implementation here, with the subtle angling of the body to the cockpit windscreen, looks great. And all these little greebling details I think are supposed to be indented around the weapons bay, but that would be extremely difficult to achieve, so I think this looks really good in relief. You do have to cut a hose piece to get the detailing here on the front of the weapons bay, which I don't particularly care about, and I think any other piece here would be too bulky. You can see that the weapons bay has 4 concussion missiles at the ready, and the twin blaster cannons are present under the cockpit. And although it's a little bit difficult to see, the cockpit does have controls, a seat, and some instrumentation. The bombing chute underneath the weapons pod looks great, and there are some additional greebling details under the cockpit pod as well. Moving to the back of the fighter, I really like the technique Jerac used here, filling in these little gaps. And the domes installed in opposing orientations are perfect for the shape of the rear of the bomber. I think the two red bionicle eye pieces are a bit too far apart to be perfectly canon accurate, but it's really impossible to get these closer together, so this looks absolutely fine. The wings are a mix of brick-built segments for the slanted portions and snot for the middle sections. They look really good, as you can tell, and I think the angling is just about perfect. The angle is actually locked in with these two, what I thought were really brilliant connections, both here and on the underside here. Top, bottom, inboard, outboard on both sides, of course. And there's a representation of the support struts with these toe ball connections here. So overall, this looks amazing, as you would expect. There's detail pretty much everywhere. Not that there's much competition, but by far the best TIE Bomber model that you can buy. This model uses 135 elements and 1,494 pieces. As you might expect, most of them are going to be black or light bluish gray, and most of them have an edge showing, and this limits your substitution options a little bit. Luckily, there are still a few you can do to reduce cost or draw from your spares. Another thing I find of general interest about Jerac's builds is that there's basically no Technic anywhere in the model, and the few Technic pieces present are not used in ways you'd expect. It's not used to create, for example, this central structural beam running through the middle here. Starting off, the subassembly between steps 29 and 30 is completely hidden by the outer portions of the model, so they're inside the pods. All of these parts can be any color, and since you're doing two of them, the parts that can be any color are as follows. The lone black inverted 1x2 2x2 bracket, part 99207, I think should be light bluish gray and it's specified in black, and you can see the edge of it right there. The black is intended to be for the cockpit seat, but you basically never see that. 8 of the 12 minifigure neck bracket with back stud, thin back wall, part 42446 are just for filler. You can see them on the edge of the wings here. You can leave these out, and while the thin wall is specified, the thick wall version, part 28974, will work equally well, and seems to be a bit more common these days. The lone black Technic lift arm thick 1x2, part 43857, is completely hidden and can be any color in step 40. The two Technic axle 3, part 4519, are completely hidden and can be any color. They are used to connect the rear assemblies to the pods. Light bluish gray is most common anyway, but perhaps you have some yellow ones lying around. As you can tell, can't see them. The four dark red brick round 1x1 with open stud, part 3062B, are very hard to see inside the weapons bay. And these are the bodies of the concussion missiles. Any dark color would be fine, black, dark blue, light bluish gray, whatever you want. The five 2x8 plates, part 3034, are completely hidden and can be any color. These are used to build out the rounded exterior portions of both of the pods. The brick modified 1x2 with studs on both sides, part 52107, can be any color, and they are hidden by the tiles you put on the wings. For the slanted sections of the wings, the 12 1x2 plates, part 3023, can be any color as they are covered up by the brackets. Those are underneath these assemblies here. 8 of the black 2x4 tiles, part 87079, on the outsides of the wings can be replaced with any 4x4 black piece, perhaps either a plate, part 3031, or a modified tile, part 6179. This could be done to reduce expense at the cost of a few extra visible studs. And lastly, for some reason ingots tend to vary wildly in price, especially in larger quantities, and there are 34 specified. They definitely make for some nice detailing, but of the 34, I would say that the 12 that go on the insides of the wings, sorry, 16 that go on the insides of the wings, are replaceable with either 1x2 tiles, part 3069B, 2x2 tiles, part 3068B, or perhaps the tiled modified 2x2 with studs on edge, part 33909. Especially if you already have some in your spares bin, or you just don't really care about the aesthetic on the inside of the wings. I have a lot of fun building the TIE Bomber, and the instructions are not very repetitive, and overall they do a good job of building up what could be fairly monotonous of a ship. I didn't have any issues following the instructions, and there is a fading version that fades out everything in the previous steps to a white color to help you keep track. In certain steps, in the parts box, the size of the plate or the brick is written, which I hadn't seen anywhere else, and I thought this was really helpful, especially for the longer pieces. I would have liked to see the sizes written next to the parts for anything longer than 6 studs, and it doesn't show up in the middle section of the instructions, but for the main central support and the wing assembly, it's really helpful. The only sections I had difficulty with were the wings. The build has you creating the central part of the wing, which is covered up in the final construction, obviously. And it attaches to the center pylon at with 4 studs, 2 on each side here. So at this point, you've already built out this central portion. So you basically have this really heavy assembly resting on a 1x2 brick wide, very tall. They look like stilts or something. And then you build out the additional sections to either side of the central support, and those lock the central support in place. And of course, you have to be very attentive building the center sections because one missed plate will throw everything off, and it's also quite difficult to get the additional sections to connect even if you have it right, because the entire thing is relatively unstable, and you have to apply a lot of pressure to get everything to click together. And speaking of pressure, the liberal use of hinge plates to get the angle for the slanted portion of the wings makes it really difficult to click everything into place. I actually felt like I was going to break something just because of how hard you actually have to press, but if you take it slow and you just apply very steady, even pressure, it all works out in the end. But it was a little bit hairy there. The model is very sturdy. The cockpit windscreen is securely in place, unlike the version 1 TIE fighter. And the wing angles again are locked down with that clever connection both on the outside and the inside, so these don't really wobble. The leading and trailing edges of the wings are not connected at both ends, so they do pivot around this tile with clip. But there's enough friction there that you can see it's not going to fall down by itself. The wings by themselves, well, each wing, if you just grab one wing, it's not strong enough to support the weight of the model, but you can pick it up by 2 wings if you really needed to. And the only other thing you need to look out for are these triangular sections here when you grab the wings, because they can just pop off. Only connected by one hollow stud. The model is a bit awkward to swoosh just because of the shape of the bomber, and it kind of forces you to hold it to either side of the center. The outer covering of each pod is pretty secure, but you still get some movement, which is a little nerve-wracking. If you have larger hands, maybe this is not an issue, but I found the best way to grab it is kind of by the central support with your thumb right here. And if I can turn this around, your other finger is kind of in the middle here. And as you can see, you can whip this around pretty much as you need to, with only very small non-structural pieces falling off. A stand of some kind would have been nice, but again, due to the awkward shape, that's a difficult thing. The center of gravity, I think, is just behind this central support. It's like right about here. And there's obviously, as you can see, not a whole lot in terms of studs or any area to stabilize a stand on. Maybe these two here and something coming across like this. Not really sure. I made this one, which looks absolutely awful, but it does the job. And the bomber sits okay on there. I built the TIE bomber immediately after I built the version 1 of the TIE fighter. And while I certainly didn't not enjoy the TIE fighter, the bomber is a different animal, and I think I have a lot more fun with the build. I think part of the appeal is that it's definitely just a beast of a model. This thing feels as hefty as it looks, and since there's no Technic, it's just basically a solid chunk of plastic throughout. You definitely feel like you are getting what you paid for. And speaking of that, Brickling's algorithm was typically returning somewhere between five and six stores, and about $210 before shipping and tax, without any substitutions. And that equates to roughly $235 or $240 with shipping and tax. So this is not an inexpensive model for sure, but it is definitely fun and a clever build without any real need of updating, in my opinion. And best of all, it's very sturdy. The bomber looks great in your collection, and I'm just not sure it really strikes a chord with your average fan to justify the cost. However, that's clearly an individual decision. If you decide to go for it, I'm very certain you will be highly satisfied with the effort and the result. I will leave a link to the instructions as well as Jerac's Flickr page in the description, per usual. Thanks as always for taking the time to watch my review of Jerac's TIE Bomber. If you've built this model, you have something to share that I left out, or have a question about something I didn't cover, please leave them below in the comments. Also, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, or following me on Instagram. Thanks, and I hope to see you back next time.